I was a runner most of my life. So in the spring of 2000, I was out running and I don't know, I love to run in nature. And I was having this weird feeling in my chest. I was like, you know what? I'm getting older. I'll just stop running. I'm 45 years old. I'm getting older. I'll just stop running. So I just stopped running. And in the spring of 2003, I started having these same symptoms again while in my office, while I was adjusting. And one of my team members, Micheline, came to me one day and she had tears in her eyes. She said, Dr. Lamarche, I'm so afraid you're going to die in front of me. I was like, what are you talking about? She said, listen to yourself breathing. She says, you sound terrible. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but you look terrible. Like you've aged 10 years in the past 6 months. Like there's got to be something seriously wrong with you. She decided to call my best friend, who happened to be a medical doctor, who I had never seen professionally, but we were best friends. He and his family were patients in my office. I was not a patient in his office. That night he called me and he said, hey, Gilles, he said, if I made a promise to someone and you were the only person on the planet who could help me fulfill my promise, would you do whatever it takes to help me? I said, yeah, of course I would. That's what friends do. He said, great, I'll see you tomorrow in my office at 4 o'clock. And he literally hung up the phone. And it's a long story, but the short part is that I got diagnosed with primary pulmonary hypertension, which is back pressure from the lungs into the heart. The only avenue that I was given medically after multiple doctors from Timmins, Sudbury, Toronto, Hamilton, you name it, all over the place. They all told me I needed a double lung and heart transplant. And that basically my heart and lungs were finished. Never smoked, never drank, always lived a healthy life. And I was like, man, that makes no sense to me. But I did all the research on it. And I believe them. They said, you'll be dead in 24 months or less unless you have a double lung heart transplant. On the 15th of May, literally 31 days later, Dr. Collin, I woke up, and I won't tell you the exact words that I heard because they're not very nice words. I heard in my head, but like, you're a beep idiot. You've been preaching and teaching this chiropractic paradigm of health and healing for 25 years. There must be something seriously wrong with your spine and nervous system. And so all this noise went through my head, like, when's the last time you had a complete spinal and neurological exam? I was like, oh my gosh, it was Dr. Martichenko when I left home for undergrad. It was like 1972. We're now in like 2004 rather. And I went in and had all that done, came back the next day. My spine looked pretty good, except from C7 to T4. It was a complete mess, didn't even look like 5 vertebrae, one on top of the other. Everything seemed to be gnarled. And important to know, I had no musculoskeletal symptoms whatsoever. I didn't have pain anywhere, but I was dying. They started adjusting me 5 days a week. Within 1 year, my pulmonary pressure was normal. I wasn't going 5 days a week anymore, but they reduced my schedule at some point. Within 2 years, I no longer had cardiomegaly. So my heart went from this big back to this big. Why? Because the body has this innate ability to adapt to what's required. When it no longer needed to pump hard to try to keep me oxygenated and alive, it was like, okay, I don't need to do this anymore. It went back to normal.
Welcome to the Vitalistic Voice. I'm Dr. Colin Elkin, and today my guest needs no introduction. He is so visible in social media. He's been visible in the chiropractic profession for a long time, longer than me. I know you can't believe it because he looks younger than I do, but nonetheless, Dr. Gilles Lamarche is with us today, the current Vice President of Life University for Professional Advancement. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Like
And
University Advancement is the title.
University Advancement. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So I can't wait to get into the story because I know he's got a wonderful chiropractic story. You're going to love hearing this today. Dr. Gilles Lamarche, thanks for being with us.
Dr. Elkin, it's a pleasure. Always a pleasure to see your beautiful smiling face, and great that we have time to share on your podcast today.
Well, I have to say, you are a person I love following, and I love every time I'm in your presence because you bring such a positive energy everywhere you go, Gilles, and it shows. I mean, everybody that knows you speaks so highly about you. You've done so much for the profession and individual institutions and businesses in the profession. You've had quite a history in chiropractic, but I'd like to dive in. Let's go way back to young Gilles Lamarche. What got you interested in chiropractic?
Well, that is a great question. Before I get into that one little tiny spot, I want to recognize that who I have become in the process has been because of great mentorship. So along the way, I've met different mentors that actually poured into me, that saw more in me that I saw in myself, that then allowed me to become the person that I became. So when you talk about, being very positive, you've only known me that way, but I used to be an extremely shy child. So I was extremely shy. So I would have never talked to you in the past. Where now you say, how is it possible that Gilles was shy? I mean, I could get in front of crowds of 5,000 people or more and talk chiropractic all day long. But I wanted to sort of give the kudos to the mentors that I've had an opportunity to meet and that have poured into me in the process. But my first chiropractic experience happened 6 months after a teacher in ninth grade pulled the chair from underneath me as I was going to sit down as a joke. I was in an all boys school. I was little. I was 12 in ninth grade. My birthday is in February. So I was little. I was young. I was immature. I hadn't reached puberty. So I got picked on a lot because I was like the perfect kid to be bullied. And that day, this new teacher, I guess he had seen that, the boys picked on me. So he thought he'd pick on me too, become friends with the majority. Anyway, he pulled the chair from underneath me. I landed on my butt. It was a terrazzo floor, like a concrete floor. And I injured my back. And they called my mom, and I went home, and we did the normal thing. My mom, she gave me aspirin, put me to bed, heating pad, that kind of stuff. And literally, Dr. Elkin, like 6 months later, I was still having trouble walking. I was going to school, but I was always in discomfort. And after my mother did the home remedies that she knew, of course, I went to the medical doctor and medication, but my pain never really went away. And so my activities were suffering. And I was out somewhere with my mom, and I was, walking a little bit weird. And so this lady who was friends with my mom said, what happened to Gilles? And she said, well, he fell. Nobody was blaming anybody. He fell, he injured his back. And so this lady said, well, why don't you take him to a chiropractor? And I remember Dr. Collin like it was yesterday. My mother said, what's a chiropractor? Right. So I just turned 70. I was 12. So 58 years ago. And the long and the short is that I ended up at a chiropractor's office, had a thorough consultation, examination, x-rays with Dr. Ron Ingard, and who was in Timmins, Ontario, where I was living, my hometown, and went back the next day for a report of findings. And he had the x-rays up, and then he had a peripheral nervous system chart, non-autonomic nervous system chart, and he had a spine. So he says to my mom before starting the report of findings, he said, did Gilles ever fall off a change table or get dropped on his head or something when he was a baby? And this I remember like it was yesterday too. And my mom said, no, but, and I remember seeing this little tear coming down the side of her cheek. And that's when I found out that I was a forceps delivery baby. So my mother described my delivery, which had been extremely traumatic for both her and for me, obviously. So Dr. Ingard says, well, today we're going to talk about what I believe is Gilles' most recent problem and how we can help him. And we're going to talk about this term that you may not have heard. It's called subluxation. And then he described a subluxation, and then he showed my subluxations, according to him, on the x-rays. And he related the subluxation to the peripheral nervous system chart and the autonomic nervous system chart. And he said, so, do you have any other problems that we didn't talk about? Well, I had always been an unhealthy child, not sick, but just never well. And it was always related to indigestion, constipation, like from day one. And so he related these subluxations to neurological function, how it affected the physiology of the organs. And based on what he was seeing on my spine, it was likely that's what was causing my indigestion. And certainly it's what was causing my constipation. And he said, when we correct these subluxations, chances are, and he didn't guarantee anything, like we never guarantee anything, the outcome. He said, but chances are that it'll normalize the nervous system function. It will normalize the physiology, which means that you'll have normal function of your organs and everything else should be normal. And I share that with people often because I say, and I was like, this guy's an idiot, right? I'd never heard that. And I was like, I've been to all these doctors. They all told my parents there's nothing wrong with me. This guy thinks he can fix my constipation by pressing on my back. But I was so tired of having this back pain for like 6 months that I said to my mom, my mom said, do you want to do this? I said, yeah, I want to do this. So he started adjusting me. And literally within weeks, three, four, five, maybe. I mean, it wasn't like the next day, but literally within weeks, my back pain was gone and I could poop for like the first time that I could remember without it hurting. And so within a matter of months, I had normal restoration of physiological function and I never looked back. And one day when I was feeling like so good, I'm in his office. I was like, man, this like totally changed my life. I now I'm starting to understand. I'm 12 years old. I'm going to his office by myself, by the way. And after that first visit and second visit, rather, my mom came first visit, second visit. And after that, I went by myself all the time, went on my bicycle and ride uptown and go get my adjustment. And I said, when I'm big, I want to be like you. He was like, really? And he was excited. And so that's when I got the vision of, I understood that the body was made to be self-developing, self-maintaining, self-healing, provided there's no interference. And here he was with his skills, removing the interference to my normal function. And then I got well. I was like, this is like a miracle. And then I realized, well, yeah, it's how, depending on people's beliefs, it's how God created us, how we were created to be self-developing, self-maintaining, self-healing, provided there's no interference. So it led me, finish high school, go on to undergrad at the University of Toronto, and then go to CMCC and become a chiropractor. And obviously along the way, I met all sorts of people. I was extremely shy. I would have never thought that I could speak in public. But Dr. Ingard had said to me that day when I shook his hand, I said, when I'm big, I'm going to be like you. He said, promise me that before you graduate, you go to a Parker seminar. And I said, well, what's a Parker seminar? He said, that's certainly going to teach you to be successful. And I said, well, aren't they going to teach me that in school? He said, no, the school's job is to teach you everything you need to learn to pass your board exams and to get a license. Your job is to learn to be successful. I was like, okay. And I remember that, like in the back of my mind. I'm in third year of chiropractic school, still a shy young man, third year of chiropractic school, and I'm going through the newspaper at school, and I see this advertisement, Parker Seminar in New York City. So I'm talking to my buddies. I was like, my first chiropractor told me we need to go to that so we can be successful when we graduate. So we literally I didn't own a car. So we get 7 guys in a car and we drive to New York City, 7 guys in one hotel room at the New York City Hilton. And I'm sitting in the back of the room. Dr. Jim Parker gets on stage. Back in the day, he would speak on Thursday for like 3 hours nonstop, no breaks. He just gets on stage, he just shares his vision, shares his passion, shares everything. And so I'm sitting back there as this little Texas guy with a really heavy Texas accent. And at that time, I'm still talking with a really heavy French accent, I'm listening to him and I'm trying to figure out what he's saying. And I'm sort of understanding it, but really not really. But then he invites everybody to go to his suite that night, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whatever it was. He said, you're all welcome to come and visit my suite. And I'm talking to my buddies like, how are all these people going to get in? And then we hear that President Reagan had stayed in that suite the weekend before. And I just, I'm a little kid from Timmins. I wanted to see what that looked like. And none of my buddies all wanted to go party. And I was like, no, I'm going up there. I said, well, look, you're never going to get in. And then you won't know where we are. So like, have a good night. See you later. And so I go up there while my friends go out to party. And I come around the corner and there's these double doors that are wide open. And I sort of peek in and I can hear people talking, but not a lot of people there. And all of a sudden, one person walks forward. He was like, come on in, come on in, come on in. So I walk in and he shakes my hand. He says, I'm Dr. Richard Yenny from Kansas City, Missouri. He said, what's your name, doctor? I was like, I'm not a doctor. I'm a student. He was like, oh, come with me. Dr. Jim loves students. So he brings me into this grandiose 2-story spiral staircase, grand piano, pool table suite. It was just beautiful. And there's like 30 people there and all the top chiropractors, obviously, of the day that were, part of that movement. And I spent some time I spent the whole night with him till like way past midnight. But at some point through the evening, Dr. Yenny pulls me aside and he says, so tell me, what's your chiropractic story? So I told him what I just told you, age 12. Blah, blah. And he's like, you need to learn to tell that to everybody. And I was like, no, you don't understand me. I'm like way too shy. I could never do that. And he looks at me. He was a little guy. He practiced over 60 years in Kansas City, Missouri. He was a little guy, but I later found out he had like 3 black belts in different disciplines. And he looks at me and he starts poking me in the chest. And he says, "What gives you the right to know a truth and not share it?" And I was stunned. I was in shock that he would do that, first poking me so hard. And I didn't know how to answer the question. Well, obviously, he was more mature and smarter than I was. He asked me again and he poking me in the chest again. And it was either on the third or the fourth time that he asked me the question that I said, nothing gives me that right. He said, "That's right, young man. Nothing gives you the right to know truth and not share it. You must learn to share this." And so I said to him, "How do I do that?" He said, "Well, when you go back home," he said, "open the yellow pages, right? That big yellow book that we used to have." He said, "Look for Toastmasters." He said, "Join a Toastmasters club close to where you live or close to where you go to school and go learn to become a public speaker." He said, "It'll be totally worth it." And he said, "To help with your accent," he said, "start watching the nightly news." He said, "And watch what the announcers do." He said, "The news anchors all move their mouth a lot. They pronounce deeply. They almost chew their words so people will understand. They've got really good diction and over exaggerate that. And you'll see what'll happen." So of course I mentor. That's what I said to you. I met Dr. Jim. I met all sorts of other people, but Richard had that major impact on me. I came back to Toronto. I joined the Toastmasters Club. I developed my public speaking skills. I worked on my diction every single night. And then I thought, okay, now I need to learn to practice this without my peers. So I was like, could I find an audience that would not be over judgmental and not too critical so I wouldn't feel bad about myself, right? And I thought, well, who could be that audience? And all of a sudden my brain went, school children. So I developed a talk. Back then, we didn't have computers, on a typewriter. I developed a talk, and I think I had 9 or 12 questions as part of my talk, and with blanks so that the kids could actually fill in the blanks. You know, the spine is made up of 3 sections: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, like easy stuff. And I talked about the nervous system. And I thought I would bring, to try to be funny, I would bring George. George is what I named my spine. So I would bring my spine. So I went to the first school, like I didn't have a car. So it was like, get on the bus, the subway, or take my bicycle, which I usually took my bicycle to school. So I went around close to CMCC and I went to the first school. And I introduced myself. I'm Gilles Lamarche. I'm an intern at Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College. I'd love to have an opportunity to come and talk to your students about, the science of the human body. And I was talking to the principal at the time. She was like, "Oh, well, let me introduce you to Mrs. So-and-so." So I get introduced to Mrs. So-and-so, who was like a first or second grade teacher. She said, "Oh, we would love to have you." So off I went. My first public talk was to a group of either first or second graders, probably 20 kids, and a teacher. The teacher loved how I interacted with the kids. So she told other teachers. So other teachers invited me in. So before I finished my last year at CMCC, I spoke at in over 50 classrooms in multiple schools. So I started at, elementary, and then I moved to middle school, and then I probably did 7 or 8 talks to high school students. And that's where I developed my skill. I just kept practicing and practicing. So when I started my own practice, I had spoken to at least 50 audiences of 20 to 30 people. So it was easy to do a healthcare class in my office. And I put myself out there and said, if you ever need a speaker at your club, the Knights of Columbus, the Kiwanis, the Rotary, I'd be happy to go and speak. And I always showed up very, very well dressed. And I always showed up with a handout. And I always showed up with business cards because I had mentors tell me that's what I needed to do. Another mentor along the way was Dr. Bob Griffin. And Bob practiced in Fort Worth. He was one of Dr. Jim's right-hand people. And he used to see, if you want to build a successful practice, you got to WOC, WOC. That was his acronym, which meant you've got to be able to be willing to whip out cards. And so he would, from the platform, he said, you got a WOC, and he'd pick up a pack of cards in his pocket, and he would just throw them out into the audience. And so I learned to walk around my town well dressed and just shake hands with people. I went into every single store, introduced myself. I'm Dr. Gilles Lamarche. I'm a new chiropractor in town. If I could ever help you or members of your family, here's my phone number. We didn't have email, we didn't have anything. So I shook hands with people because even today I talk to students. I was like, when you graduate, what kind of business are you going to be in? And the typical answer I get is, well, I'm going to be in the healthcare business, or I'm going to be in the chiropractic business. I said, well, yes, but can I tell you what kind of business you're going to be in? And they go, yeah. I said, you're going to be in the people
People
business.
business. I knew you were going to say that. Yeah. Hmm.
That's where it started.
It's brilliant. I'm sitting back here. I wish I had my blanket and my hot cup of cocoa because you are such a good storyteller. I just love listening to this, and you've certainly developed your public speaking skills beyond most. So I would love to know now. So let's go from there. And you had a very successful practice in Canada for 25 years. Am I correct in saying that?
That is correct. Yep.
And then let's dive into the story. What happened?
So it's interesting. I was a runner most of my life. I was a track athlete in both high school and college. And I'd say I was always, I was a pretty fit guy. And the busyness of practice, the busyness of having children, I realized over time I really wasn't doing anything for me. I was literally taking care of my practice members and I was taking care of my children. So in the spring of 2000, I was out running and I don't know, I love to run in nature and I was having this weird feeling in my chest. And I know to this day, still to this day, I'm allergic to cats and horses, mostly dogs a little bit. But I had this sensation while I was running that there was like, I was a cat beside me. So I was like, you know what? I'm getting older. I'll just stop running. I'm 45 years old. I'm getting older. I'll just stop running. So I just stopped running. And in the spring of 2003, I started having these same symptoms again while in my office, while I was adjusting. And one of my team members, Micheline, came to me one day and she had tears in her eyes. She said, Dr. Lamarche, like, I'm like so afraid you're going to die in front of me. I was like, what are you talking about? She said, listen to yourself breathing. She says, you sound terrible. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but you look terrible. Like you've aged 10 years in the past 6 months. Like there's got to be something seriously wrong with you. And of course, typical male, right? I tried to justify my position. I said, no, I'm allergic to something. I'm just trying to figure out what it is. Well, she decided to call my best friend, who happened to be a medical doctor who I had never seen professionally, but we were best friends. He and his family were patients in my office. I was not a patient in his office, but she called him. I later found out because that night he called me and he said, hey, Gilles, he said, if I made a promise to someone and you were the only person on the planet who could help me fulfill my promise, would you do whatever it takes to help me? I said, yeah, of course I would. That's what friends do. He said, great, I'll see you tomorrow in my office at 4 o'clock. And he literally hung up the phone because he knew that I was probably going to argue with him because we had different paradigms as it related to health. And so I thought, oh my gosh, he knew I didn't see patients on Tuesday afternoons. This was a Monday night. So I told him I would do whatever I could do. So I showed up at his office. And it's a long story, but the short part is that I got diagnosed with primary pulmonary hypertension, which is back pressure from the lungs into the heart. It was measured at 57 millimeters mercury of pressure. The normal is 15, which means the back pressure into the right side of my heart was 4 times greater than it's supposed to be. And therefore, as the human body has this capacity, my body had adapted to that. And the adaptation process was the secondary diagnosis called cardiomegaly, which is an enlargement of the heart. So my heart was enlarged. We say our heart's about roughly the size of a fist. My heart was 2.5 times the normal because my body had adapted. And so probably from that 2000 mark or prior to that, my body was adapting. And now all of a sudden in 2003, my body can no longer adapt. That's limitations of physical matter because there literally was no more room in my chest for my heart to expand anymore. My chest was full. And so the only avenue that I was given medically after multiple doctors from Timmins, Sudbury, Toronto, Hamilton, you name it, all over the place, they all told me I needed a double lung and heart transplant. And that basically my heart and lungs were finished. never smoked, never drank, always lived a healthy life. And I was like, man, that makes no sense to me. But I did all the research on it, and I believe them. They said, you'll be dead in 24 months or less unless you have a double lung heart transplant. So here's my best friends, who my children call Uncle Barry, and his children call me Uncle Gilles, in their 40s, right? Best friends. He said, you have to do this. And I was like, Barry, that is like so outside my paradigm. You know that. He said, you're going to die if you don't do it. And I'm not going to leave my nephews and my niece without a dad. So you've got to sign this form. And I was like, no, I can't do that. And so I started researching more and more and more. And I got to understanding really what primary pulmonary hypertension was. And typically people die in 24 months post-diagnosis or less. And there's no recovery. Nobody gets well from primary pulmonary hypertension. And then I looked at double lung and heart transplant recipients. And what they were basically telling me is that you do nothing, you'll be dead in 2 years. You agree to this transplant, crazy invasive type of situation, put somebody else's heart and lungs in your body, take medication for the rest of your life, and you may have 5 good years. I was like, 2 if I do nothing, 5 if I do all of this, which is an unmatched in my paradigm. And so I made the decision personally, that I didn't want to do that. But I was a single dad with 3 kids, and my 3 children were all in college. So I thought, is it selfish for me just to allow myself to die, or do I need to talk to my kids? And of course, my answer is you need to talk to your kids. And so when my children came home for Thanksgiving, 2 of them were in Ottawa and one was in Toronto. When they came home for Thanksgiving, we sat around the table and I said, Dad hasn't been feeling really good lately. And, I've gone to all these tests. Uncle Barry's done XYZ for Canadians listening in. And I either do this or I'm probably going to die. And I don't want to do that. And simultaneously, and my children could tell you today, simultaneously, my 3 children said the exact same words. Then don't do it. How is it possible that 3 people could say the exact same thing in the exact same sequence at the exact same time and not have it be a message? I said, well, I appreciate that. And he said, when the conversation continue, of course, we'll miss you when you die, blah, blah, blah. So we had all that conversation. We all cried. And I called Barry. I was like, I ain't doing it. He said, you're going to die. I said, I know. I'm okay with that. And I was like totally okay to transition. And so temporarily, until I found somebody to take over my practice, I will say I became somewhat of a chiropractic heretic because I started pumping Ventolin into my lungs like every 30 minutes while I was in practice. I needed that to be able to breathe enough to be able to adjust the next group of people. And I loved my practice and my practice members so much, I didn't really want to leave. But if I was going to leave, I wanted to leave them in really, really good hands. And it was a very large practice. And I was like, you can't expect a new grad to come in and take this over. It's not going to work. And so I put it out there. And very joyfully, in very short order, a young couple who had been practicing in 2 separate practices in the Toronto area for 5 years were interested. She was from Timmins, wanted to come back north. He loved the northern sort of attitude of nature, et cetera. And so they took my practice over. So I officially retired on the 14th of April in 2004. And I went home for I would say my final planning. And I didn't think I was going to make it another year. Like if I didn't take Ventolin, I couldn't walk. I couldn't do much of anything. I had trouble going upstairs. I would park my car at home, and it's, to walk into the house is probably about 30 or 40 feet. And I would have to stop along the way. And I was 49 years old and I could barely walk. And so I did like my final preparations. I chose the songs I wanted to sing at my funeral because I wanted them to have a party. I said to my kids, I know you'll be sad when I go, but don't focus on being sad. Just feel glad that I came. Feel happy that we had all this time together. And then I slept a lot, obviously. On the 15th of May, literally 31 days later, Dr. Collin, I woke up, and I won't tell you the exact words that I heard because they're not very nice words I heard in my head, but they're like, you're a beep beep idiot. You've been preaching and teaching this chiropractic paradigm of health and healing for 25 years. There must be something seriously wrong with your spine and nervous system. And for chiropractors listening in, they'd say, like, did you not think of that before? Like, what a loser. Because the second thought that came into me was, well, how could that be? I get checked by a chiropractor like every week or two. But it was the third thought that was my awakening. Never by the same chiropractor. I was not a practice member in any practice. I got checked by buddies. It's just like you and I could go out for, I don't drink coffee, but we could go out, let's say for lunch or something. And I might say, hey, Colin, you want to come to my office or you want to go to your office? You can check me and I can check you. That was the kind of care I was under. And so all this noise went through my head. Like, when's the last time you had a complete spinal neurological exam? I was like, oh my gosh, it was Dr. Martichenko when I left home for undergrad. It was like 1972. We're now in like 2003, 2004 rather. And I was like, it's ridiculous. I hadn't had an X-ray in my spine in at least 30 years, etc. So I reached over. I was still in bed. I reached over. We used to have phones beside our bed back that were plugged into the wall back in the day. So I called my former office manager, Janet, and I said, I want to make an appointment as a new patient. She said, oh, you want to come in and get adjusted? I said, no, I want to come in as a new patient. I want them to take me through our entire new patient protocol. She's like, oh, you've been getting adjusted since you're 12. Why would you want to do that? And then I said, Janet, where am I a practice member? And then she got totally quiet. She was like, oh my gosh, Jill, nowhere. I said, exactly. You get better care than I do. Like, you're on a schedule, you have an appointment, we take notes, you have a chart, we know what's happening, nobody knows that about me. She was like, well, let's make you an appointment. And I went in and had all that done, came back the next day, and my spine looked pretty good, except from C7 to T4. It was a complete mess. Like, it didn't even look like 5 vertebrae, one on top of the other. Everything seemed to be gnarled. And I think that what happened was micro trauma, adjusting, 150 or more people every single day for 25 years. I basically beat myself up. And important to know, I had no musculoskeletal symptoms whatsoever. I didn't have pain anywhere, but I was dying. They started adjusting me 5 days a week. By the end of August, right? You're talking about, I went in May 15th for my first exam, my consult exam, went in May 16th for my report of findings. By the end of August, my pulmonary pressure had dropped from 57 to 27. Within 1 year, my pulmonary pressure was normal. I wasn't going 5 days a week anymore, but they reduced my schedule at some point. Within 2 years, I no longer had cardiomegaly. So my heart went from this big back to this big. Why? Because the body has this innate ability to adapt to what's required. When it no longer needed to pump hard to try to keep me oxygenated and alive, it was like, okay, I don't need to do this anymore. It went back to normal. And I tell people all the time, if you're pumping iron and you start with 10-pound weights, you go up to 20, and all of a sudden you're doing 50-pound curls, you get these big muscles. If you stop curling in 6 months, a year, 18 months, those big muscles are going to be gone because your body no longer needs them. The heart's a muscle. It's exactly what happened to me. And so I got completely well. Now, what we discovered in the process is that I've got plastic deformity at T2. So the vertebra is actually, slanted somewhat, right to left. And I subluxate at that level very, very easily. And so going back into practice thinking that I could adjust again was pretty much out of a possibility. It wasn't a possibility. However, I still wanted to go back into practice. And for a whole week, I thought, I'm just going to go back into practice. So I need to find, where am I going to go? Where do I open up a practice? Obviously, can't open up a practice in Timmins. Blah, 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 blah. All these thoughts going through my head. And then on Saturday, I fall off a 7-foot ladder and I break 6 ribs, 3 of them right off my spine right at the costotransverse junction at T7, 8, and 9. 9 also broke on the angle, 10 on the angle, 11 on the angle. So I had like 3 months of just laying there, letting my body heal. I was like, what do I do with the rest of my life? And that's when I ended up getting a phone call, had a conversation. The president at Parker University needed some help to rebuild their seminars. I had been speaking at that organization for like 35 years. So I went there as a volunteer to help him for 3 months. And I ended up staying for 6 years.
Wow. Wow. You know, and I just want to address, Dr. Gilles, you brought up something, and this is something that we talk with our coaching clients about very regularly. And we have the privilege of talking to young docs or even seasoned docs who want to grow their practice. And that's one of the things that we talk about quite often. And you brought this up is, and I love the term congruency. As chiropractors, we are very, very quick to say to our patients what level of care that they need. Do the x-rays, do the exam, get their children in to get checked and build a big practice. But I often ask chiropractors to look at in the mirror at themselves and say, how often are you getting checked? How often have you had a full exam or a re-examination? And is your staff, your team members, are they under a care plan of care specifically so that you have an objective outcome measure that you're following in your office? And it's so often, and I hope that our viewers heard that story and really had it resonate with them, because how often in our profession are we hypocritical that we have the best knowledge for our patients and we don't do it for ourselves?
And you know, I take that, and I don't think it's because we're hypocrites. I think it's I was under the impression I was under regular chiropractic care because I was getting checked by buddies every couple of weeks. And so I realized I was being incongruent, but I didn't know I was being incongruent. So it wasn't a conscious thing because I loved getting checked and adjusted, you know. Um, but I'll ask the questions, you know, in an audience, no matter the size, I'll say, you know, how many of you are under a regular chiropractic care, a chiropractic audience? CAs, every freaking hand goes up. Everybody's under regular chiropractic care. I said, so I'm going to ask you a series, keep your hand up. I said, I'm going to continue to ask you questions. And if I ask you one question where the answer is no, drop your hand down. By the time I get to question 5 or 6, there's less than 10% of the hands that are up. And some of the questions will be, you know, did you have a reevaluation in the past 6 months? Boom. You know, does your chiropractor follow the same protocol for you as he or she follows for all their other practice members or patients? Boom. Most of the hands go down. They don't book appointments. They show up whenever they want. They're not on a schedule. I ask all these questions because my goal is to get them to the point where less than 10% of the hands are up. And I can always get to that point no matter the size of the audience. And usually I can get to that point in 5 or 6 questions. And so then I say, you know what? That was me. I was one of you. And then I changed. When I made this discovery, I changed. So now I have the same chiropractor who looks at me every single week, adjusts me if I need it, doesn't adjust me if I don't need it, and does regular evaluations. I have an appointment. It's in my schedule. I'm on a care plan. They take notes. We could pull the chart, blah, 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 blah. And look what's happened. I went from being an unhealthy, you know, when the diagnosis was made, 48-year-old to being like a super healthy 70-year-old. And in 2023, Dr. Colin, I had this idea. I woke up on a Sunday morning and I say BJ would say it was a thought flash. I call it a God flash. I had this flash and it was like, go to the track, go to the track. Sorry, I said 2020, it's 2022, in July of 2022. And so I said to my wife, we have a beautiful track at Life University. So I said, I'm going to go to the track today. She said, why? I said, I have no idea. I've just been called to go to the track. So I came to our track. It was a beautiful Sunday morning. And I just walked around the track. The birds were chirping. The greenery is just gorgeous. You've been on campus. You know how beautiful it is. And I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot how serene I feel on a track. And so I stayed up there for like an hour. And I didn't run. I just walked around the track. I just took it all in. And I got home and I said to my wife, I'm going to start training. I want to run one more track meet in my life. She was like, oh, that's nice. What are you going to do? So I said, Mom, my plan, I'm going to be on the track 3 days a week. I'll make sure I'm in the gym twice a week to do some strength and conditioning. Because I'd like going to the gym, but I was, you know, on and off kind of thing. Go walk, do this, do that. But I didn't have a program. So I created my own program. So I did that week 1. I did it week 2. I did part of it week 3. And week 3 on the Sunday, I get up. We'd had a life leadership weekend, which I think you've been to one of those. It's busy. I was in charge of it all. I was tired. So I get up in the morning and my wife said, "Oh, you're going to go to the track today?" Because I always had at least one weekend day when I went to track. I said, "Oh, I know." And I had all these excuses. I'm like so tired from the weekend, da 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 da. She said, "You know, you're going to be so disappointed in yourself tonight." Because she knows that I'm a committed person, right? She said, "You'll be so disappointed in yourself." That's all she said. That was enough for me to go, yeah. So I went upstairs, put on my running clothes, and I came to the track. And that day, I saw a gentleman who was coaching someone at the high jump uh, pit. It was a young lady, and I just said good morning, and I went about and did my thing. When I was done my training, this little girl was gone. She was probably a middle school girl. She was gone, and that gentleman was still there. And he came to introduce himself to me. I found out that he was a former Olympian from Jamaica in the 400 meters. And it was so interesting because we have this conversation because he asked me, are you training for anything? I said, well, I'd like to run, another meet in my life. I'd like to run a master's meet, sometime next year kind of thing in 2023. And then he tells me for what? I said, well, I was a 400-meter runner in high school and college. So then we continue this conversation and he tells me, well, I was a 400-meter Olympian from Jamaica. He didn't really look like an Olympian because, he looked like he put on a little bit of weight kind of thing. But so we had this conversation and it was a back and forth kind of conversation. And I was like, would you happen? And I asked him his age and I said, well, would you happen to know Neil Gardner from Kingston, Jamaica, who's a former Olympian, who is now a chiropractor in Kingston, Jamaica? He said, Neil and I, we went to high school together. And I thought, this guy's bluffing me for sure, right? So I grabbed my phone right with him. I said, well, let's FaceTime Neil. So we FaceTime Neil. Neil answers his phone. There's the two of us on the phone. He was like, oh my gosh, how do you guys know each other? So they had gone to high school together. And they'd been on the Jamaican team together. So he started as my coach. And by December, he said to me, I think you should start competing in the indoor season. I said, I only want to run one meet in the summer. He said, if you want to run a good meet in the summer, you need to prepare yourself to compete again. I suggest you look at competing in the indoor season. I said, okay, he's my coach. I'm paying him to do it. So I got online. I joined the U.S. Track and Field Association, and I registered for my first meet. It was in Norfolk, Virginia. So I paid the registration fee. I bought a flight. I rented a car, rented a room. It was a Southeast Region U.S. Track and Field Association Championship. I went to Norfolk, Virginia. I competed in the 400, and I won. And I was like, how is this even possible? And I said to my wife, it's like I just took a big bite of the juiciest, wonderful, most delicious apple I've ever eaten in my life, because it qualified me to go to the national championships a couple of weeks later in Louisville, Kentucky. So I came home. Of course, I went online. I was qualified. I registered. I went to Louisville, Kentucky, and I won again. And I got disqualified because I stepped on the white line in the first corner twice. But my time was good enough. I had won. I had won the race. So it still qualified me to go to the World Championship. So off I went. So I started my first competition, I think it was the second week of February. By March, I was in Torun, Poland, competing in the World Championship. I did not win a medal there. The competition was beautiful, great competition, over 4,000 athletes from 80-something countries. I was a member of the Team USA because I never ran, even though I was Canadian, because I never ran for the Canadian team. I ran for Team Ontario, but I never ran for Team Canada. I was able to qualify and I could run as on Team USA. So I ran on Team USA. I was one of 234 athletes, I think we were, that went to Poland. And I had the time of my life. And I came back and competed all the way throughout 2023. I won 11 gold medals in 2023. And I started competing in 2024. Did very well through the winter season into the summer season, and I made it to the Outdoor World Championship on October 8th. So on October 8th, I was competing. So now, the more I trained with this coach, the more he started saying, okay, you're a really good 400-meter runner, and you should look at running on the two sides of the 400. You're fast enough to run a 200, and you've got long enough, strides to run the 800, so you consider maybe crossing over and doing all three. And I was like, man, that's a lot. So I started by just adding the 200, and then I won a couple gold medals in the 200. And so I started running the 800, did well at the nationals. I think I placed fourth at the nationals this last summer in the 800. So I was like, I'm just going to keep doing that. So anyway, I registered for all three races at the World Championship. The first race is the 200. I qualify for the 200. I'm in lane 8 in the final, and I'm feeling fantastic. Like I was like, oh my gosh, I think I can win a medal today at the World Championship. It just felt so good. And I'm in lane 8. I come out of the blocks super clean, very, very fast. I come out of the curve. I'm like obviously in the lead, and I didn't know how far everybody was behind me, but I started ahead of everybody because I'm in lane 8. And all of a sudden, my leg just let go. My right leg just let go. And I suffered what's called a full thickness tear of the rectus femoris, 10.5 centimeters above the patella. And the distance between the proximal and the distal end of the tear was 4.7 centimeters. Sorry, 4.5, 10.7 from the patella, 4.5 separation, which is about 2 inches. And then I had multiple, I say minor tears. They weren't full thickness tear. I had multiple tears in my sartorius as well as the vastus intermedius and the vastus lateralis. So that laid me up. I mean, I was laid up for a number of weeks. I went from like being laid up to being in a wheelchair to having crutches to using a cane. And of course, when I got back to Atlanta, ended up, fast tracking in to get checked, and through a friend got a really, really good consult with the surgeon who takes care of the Atlanta Braves and the Atlanta United. So I got to the top really, really quick. And he looked at everything with the MRI, et cetera, and he says, Gilles, he said, it's a pretty easy repair to fix that, but, and I was like, okay, but I had a DVT in my posterior tibial vein. So a deep vein thrombosis for a clot, a big clot. And they wanted to do all sorts of very invasive work before they would fix my leg. And so I said, I am not taking the chance of having like 2 life-threatening surgeries at my age to correct a non-life-threatening injury. And so I did everything that we know to do in chiropractic, from clear mind, clear atlas, because I mean, the first few weeks I couldn't walk, I couldn't get up, I was laid down. That's all I could do. And my wife's a chiropractor, thank God for that. And so I got clear. I'm good friends with Joe Dispenza. He told me how to meditate for my healing. And within 9 weeks, my rectus femoris had reattached without surgery. At week 16, I did take blood thinners through this process to try to take care of the clot, because I really didn't want to die. Medicine is good for that, right? When you're in a crisis, you need them. So I agreed to take these blood thinners, and I had to take those for 12 weeks. So at the end of 12 weeks, I went back for a Doppler, and the doctor came back in after the exam, and she said, do you remember what I told you we were going to see when you came back? I said, yeah, you said it would probably calcify, would probably scar into the lumen of the blood vessel. There'd be a little bump, but it really wouldn't affect blood flow that much, and I, shouldn't affect my activities in any way. She said, yeah, that's what I thought. I was completely wrong. And she looked at me, she said, you have nothing. There is no sign that you've ever had an injury there. It's like, it's completely healed. And I said, interesting. I said, do you want to touch my leg, my thigh? Because she knew I tore it up. And so I had her palpate my thigh. And I said, it's reattached on MRI. She said, without surgery? I said, yeah. So of course we had a conversation about what we started off with, right? The philosophy that we live in chiropractic is that the body was made to be self-developing, self-maintaining, self-healing, provided there's no interference. Eliminate the interference, the body has this ability to heal. So in the physical world, you say, how is it that something that was separated by 2 inches, how did it reconnect? I can't answer that question. I don't know how it reconnected, but I just know I have the MRI to show a big white gap that's 2 inches, and I have the MRI that shows no gap.
Wow. Wow. And when you look at the story, Dr. Gilles, you look back 22 years ago and you see a man with pulmonary hypertension and cardiomegaly, and 22 years later, then you see an athlete with a torn rectus femoris and now completely healed. And what's the intermediary? What's the difference? Chiropractic.
Well,
Chiropractic.
chiropractic, good nutrition, meditation, prayer practices. I mean, I did everything that you could do to help it heal. Um, and I did gravitate to using peptides because a good buddy of mine said, this will stimulate it. And then I think at week five, I had a stem cell injection put right into the wound. And then half of it into the wound, half of it intravenously. I had never done anything like that before. But I will tell you that the physician who did the stem cell said to me, that is not what reconnected. He said, share your protocol with me if you would. So I shared my protocol of everything I was doing because I didn't tell you everything I was doing. But I started off, I was literally personally massaging my own leg when it was painful, trying to bring the ends together, just massaging it together, using somebody had told me black castor oil. That's what I used. I did the ice. I had a laser unit at home. I mean, I did everything to stimulate. And so when I listed all that to him back on a text, and he said, wow, that's a serious commitment to healing. And I said, Jay, I only have two legs. I really want to keep them both. And of course, we laughed about it. But he was like, he had never experienced. He's been an emergency physician for, I think, 21 years. He said, I've never seen that. The surgeon that I saw said, I have never seen that in my entire career. Same thing with the vascular surgeon. She was like, seriously, like, I've never seen that. It's like amazing. And so I have this opportunity to teach them along the way about what can happen. But keeping your nervous system clear and fully functional, it to me is the key,
That
right?
is
Because
the key. Yeah.
the brain's the master computer. So if your brain communicates with your body, or your body communicates with the brain, and we have what BJ used to refer as that normal complete cycle, everything is possible. Full healing is possible. And that's what I get to live. So today, I'm not sure when your podcast is getting released, but today's March the 7th. And tomorrow, I've been in the gym for almost 2 months now. Tomorrow will be 5 months since my injury. Tomorrow will be my first day back on the track.
Nice.
5 months
Nice.
post-injury. Even when I had the injury, the surgeon said, with surgery, you should be able to run within 12 months. I'm 5 months post-injury. I've been, like I said, in the gym for 8 weeks. I cycle every day for about 20 minutes. So I know that my leg is working well. And I'm not going to be out sprinting tomorrow, but I'm going to be re-educating my body to recondition myself because it's amazing how I feel so deconditioned in 5 months. Even though I've been in the gym for 2, I haven't run in 5 months. I've gone for a couple little jogs just to test my leg out kind of thing. But yeah, so 5 months to the day. Tomorrow happens to be tomorrow, the 8th, I'll be on the track.
Well, congratulations. That's a great recovery. And I give you credit. And you put the time and effort into healing and the focus and mental strength that you had through all this healing. But as you say, I personally don't believe it. It doesn't happen with unless you have a fully functioning nervous system. It just doesn't,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this week,
Yeah.
and my wife mentioned it because she saw it on the printer. This week, I actually registered for the 2025 World Senior Games.
Fabulous.
So I will be there in October, and I plan on winning a medal.
Good for you. Good for you. That's
And
amazing.
I'm doing it for chiropractic. Like, I got nothing to prove for me. I mean,
Yeah.
70 years old, do I need a medal? No, I don't need a medal. But I think that the story becomes even more powerful from a news media perspective if I win a medal, particularly if I can win a gold medal. That
Right.
I go from supposed to be dead at age 50 to winning a gold medal at the World Senior Games at age 70.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm doing it. That really is my
Amazing.
purpose. It's my motivator. Because like Gilles, I mean, I got nothing to prove to myself.
Well, I want to, if you don't mind, I'd love to dive into the next stage of your story here. And because you bring just such this positive energy to life and everyone around you, I think you just initiate success everywhere you go. And so I want to just talk about the story of you going to Parker and Parker seminar program and volunteering and then being there for 6 years and really helping to rejuvenate that program. That was actually my very first seminar when I got into practice in the early 90s. we went to a Parker seminar, and it was in Las Vegas. And I remember getting my brown bag, and I
Yeah.
became a BB. I became a brown bagger. I was quite
Linebacker.
proud of myself. Yeah. So tell us about that experience.
Well, I'd been speaking at Parker seminars. I started going in 1977. So I'd been speaking at Parker seminars since my second year of practice. I had a very, very quick start into a very successful practice. And I sat at Dr. Jim's knees, at every seminar. Back in the day, we used to have a seminar every 2 months. So I went every 2 months. So 3 times a year you went to Dallas, once a year you went to Vegas, once a year you went to Florida, and once a year you went somewhere else, San Francisco, LA, wherever it was. So I did that. And by the end of my second year, I was already on the program. So I spoke there for a long time. Um, and I managed Parker Seminars as a business. They were losing a lot of money at the time, and we were able to turn it around and create positive cash flow for them by the second year. And then I ended up taking a VP position there. I was over research, clinics, and postgraduate education. So I learned a lot that I knew nothing about really. And then I left there in 2012 uh, because of a difference of opinion on how things should happen. And so I retired again in 2012. And in the spring, I think May of 2013, Dr. Guy Reekman, who was the president of Life University at the time, reached out to me. He said, just come and work with me. I'd never been to Georgia. He said, just come and work with me. I said, to do what? I said, I don't know yet. I just want you to come and work. I want what you're referring to. I want your level of energy on my team. And so I came to visit, and boy, I fell in love with this place. The way I tell the story, I got off at the bell tower in a rented car, and I got out of the car and I just stood there for a minute and just sort of took it all in. And I was like, wow. And I can't describe what I felt, but there's this sense of ease, this sense of peace, this sense of right, this sense of purpose that I felt just being there without talking to anybody. And then I met with Dr. Reekman. I met with the people I'd be working with that would be reporting to me, blah, 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 create a position. And so I've been here now I've been here since October of 2013. So it'll be 12
Wow.
years this October
Wow.
I've been at Life University, and I don't want to go anywhere else. I love living here. I love working here. I love being a member of this team. We have a new president as of 4 weeks ago today, as a matter of fact, Dr. Brian McCauley, who was previously provost here at Life University from 2004 to 2012. He was the president at Parker University for, I think, from 2013 to 2016 or something like that. Has had multiple roles, but Brian joined our team here as the leader 4 weeks ago, and I think we're just going to knock it out of the park.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about that. What's happening on the inside at Life University? What's the big goal? What's the big vision now, and what are you working on?
Well, we're still the largest single campus chiropractic institution on the planet. Dr. Sid decades ago started what we referred to as the life movement, to bring this vitalistic thinking around the globe through the chiropractic profession. So we have initiatives, in a lot of different areas. We have offices of representation in Switzerland, in Geneva. We have an office of representation in Germany. We have an office of representation in China. We're looking at different ways, and we have one in Costa Rica, looking at different ways to engage people and continue to build the chiropractic profession because we know the impact that it will have on humanity. We currently have about 2,700 students at Life University. We have had students here from more than 60 or 70 countries now. So it is a very sort of diverse population at the institution. We're on 110 beautiful acres. Obviously, your son graduated from here. It's a great institution. From a innovative perspective, we no longer do cadaveric dissection. Everything is done virtually because this is how students learn. But we have, I think, 12 anatomage tables, and each anatomage tables has 5 different corpses, which are humans that have died, whose corpses have been digitized. And so very, very high technology on that end. During the COVID era, the beginning of the COVID era, our research team that had been developing a mannequin for palpation and adjustment techniques completed that project. We have 20 what we call PATs, palpation and adjustment trainers. For those of you who have trained your CPR on a Recessian, it's that version of a chiropractic mannequins. I think it's 67 sensors along the spine and pelvis hooked up to a computer monitor so the students can tell exactly where they're palpating. And then when it's hooked up to a force table, you learn how to deliver the force, the direction of the force, etc. So everything can be measured before you start laying your hands on real people. So this is not to replace student clinic. It's not to replace you palpating your colleagues or starting to adjust students. It's the first step. So instead of having to go through what you and I went through in college, where we got beat up by our peers as we're all learning to adjust each other, and then we need to go to the chiropractor 2, 3 times a week just to get corrected what's getting hurt by our peers. That technology is active, and boy, the learning outcomes are fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So we've got some physical projects of things we want to do. We're in the fundraising stage for an alumni and events center. We'd like to convert our library into a full modern student center, but of course that all takes all sorts of money. And then we have a dream of building a research and human performance center at Life University. So I'm working on that dream as well. And obviously that'll take fundraising, it'll take some public funds. So, I work with politicians both at the state and the federal level to look at how we can actually support what they want. And certainly with the MAHA movement activity in the United States, I tell people all the time, there has never been a better time in history.
Mhm.
Never been a better time in history to be a chiropractor. And I've heard that statement, Dr. Collins, since I went to chiropractic school.
Me too.
But never has it been more true than it is today.
Mhm.
And so we have some insights, we have some individuals that we know well, that understand who we are, that understand the benefits we bring to humanity, who I believe in time will take a stand and support us in the movement. So I'm excited about that. And I tell people all the time, because I get asked, how did that happen? How did you meet so-and-so? How come you've developed a friendship with Robert Kennedy? I mean, how does that happen? I said, you show up. You show up, you got to be at the table. You've got to be at the table, and you got to be willing to contribute time, talent, and treasure. Right? I get asked all the time. I mean, with Bobby, it was because I made a major contribution to the Children's Health Defense Fund. And then he invited everybody who had made a contribution at that level, and there happened to be 4 couples there who made a contribution at that level. He invited us all to go spend the weekend with him and his wife at the Kennedy compound back in 2019. And then the relationship has just evolved from that. So there's a lot of players, there's a lot of people involved. There's a big mission that we all have. But when I say there's never been a better time, and right now as I sit at my conference table in my office, I have a picture of Dr. Jim Parker ahead of me. I have a picture of BJ Palmer, Mabel Palmer there. I mean, literally there. I see these people every single day. And I was like, we are working to bring your vision to fruition. And I know that when we do it, we impact humanity the way chiropractic impacted me. So I feel so blessed that I've been given these major challenges in in my life, because in the middle of the challenge, in the heart of the challenge, there was these great opportunities for improving my learning. And so I've learned through each of these challenges what's really, really possible. So I say, I've been challenged so I could experience the opportunity and the result of walking into the opportunity rather than focusing on the challenge.
Incredible. Incredible. And hey, I want to respect your time here, but I do want to just ask you one more question because this is something that's on my heart. And as a fellow Canadian, I am deeply committed and concerned at the same time about the level of chiropractic education in Canada. And not only that, seeing so many students migrate to the US to go to chiropractic schools because they look for different philosophies in education or whatever that may be, or the restriction in the volume of the main school in Canada here at CMCC. And UQTR, of course, is much smaller and all French speaking. So, is there any direction that you're involved in or that Life University is involved in expansion north of the border?
No. And I've had these conversations with people for, a number of people, a number of times, and it's financial, right? So I had somebody come to me, well, help us build a chiropractic college. I said, come to me with $10 million pre-raised in the bank, we can start the conversation. Because people can't expect that our university would take money from our students to build a chiropractic college somewhere else. So we're in negotiation with someone now in Africa, but we're not putting up the money. We are going to loan them or lend them or allow them to utilize our curriculum. Our curriculum is very, very strong, so we're happy to be participants in that. You know, we were participating in that with New Zealand years ago. We're participating in that with the new Principle of Chiropractic College in Australia, but we're not going to open them ourselves. People have to get their process together and raise the money for it. If they wanted us to open it, they would have to come with money so that we have money to open the school. Now, are we willing to loan our expertise? I would say, you know, the past president said yes. I would think our current president will say yes. And I believe our board of trustees would say yes, because it's part of the life movement. We want to support the expansion and the evolution of principled chiropractic schools. We absolutely want to help. We're just not going to fund it.
Right. Right. Understandable. So what final words? What's next for Dr. Gilles? What are your big personal goals? Obviously getting back on the track, but what are your big business goals moving forward? Because I don't see you at the age of 70 slowing down at all.
No, I have, you know, the past president asked me, you know, what's your retirement plan? I said, honestly, I don't have a retirement plan. I think that people retire to expire, and I'm not ready to expire. And he said, so how long do you want to stay? I said, as long as I'm adding value, then keep me. And the day that you think I'm no longer adding value, then just tell me it's time for me to go out to pasture and send me home, and I'll be okay with that. So right now, the new president came in with 5 very strategic initiatives that he wants to accomplish in the next 2 years. So my goal is to support him in all the initiatives that he wants to create. And certainly what I would like to leave as my legacy of this institution. So if you want to look at the big goal, and I've had a rendering created by a friend of mine's wife, who's an architect, sitting on my wall here for a few years already. But I would like my legacy to really be the Research and Human Performance Center at Life University. So as much as I'm working at raising money to do other things, that's what I would like my legacy to be.
Amazing. You know, and what a great legacy that would be. And very congruent with your personal values, your core values.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Gilles, this has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. You do bring such an energy, and it's great just to sit back and listen to your stories because you are such an eloquent storyteller. So I do appreciate you being here.
And hopefully you're going to be at the AFC Spring Conference, because I booked a table for Life University to be present just this week. So maybe I'll see you in Toronto in a few
Fabulous.
months.
We actually have a table there, so that's wonderful.
Wonderful. I
See you
look forward
there.
to seeing you and giving you a real hug then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Doc. It was my pleasure.